Greetings. Welcome to Wednesday night. Welcome to our April small group who is on the road tonight from a different household. Good times. Glad you're all together. Glad the rest of you are with us on this Wednesday night. We have a fun subject to tackle, so I'm excited to get into it. But first of all, a list. So let's go with said bad designs. On Wednesday nights, we're always loving questionable designs that people have put into their houses or buildings or the outside of places. It's always good times. And then some pet peeves. And we'll decide if they're your pet peeves as well. Okay, let's do this. By the way, disclaimer. This past Sunday, I started off my message by saying it was a doctrinal rebuttal of Brian Spicer's message the week before. I was 100% kidding. If there's any question of that, Brian did a fantastic job, and he's coming back. I've already scheduled him in for several times throughout the rest of the year. So he and I are partners. We are buddies. And if I had something serious to say about what somebody said from the pulpit, I would address it a little bit differently than just kind of saying it off the cuff like that. Anyway, let's go with. I feel like we've seen this before. Don't put electrical outlets in your showers, people. Just a bad idea. All right, let me take down the comments. We can see this. All right, I feel like we've seen this too. Just a giant trapdoor hole in the floor with stairs going downstairs. That is just a bad idea. Oh boy, here we go. Monica got a little taste of going viral last week, and now that's all she wants to do is be live. I see hide nor hair of her for a while until I hit the live button, and then she's here. So, hello. Yeah, she's very happy. This cat is obsessed with me, and that's awesome. All right, gutterless house. You can see the water pours directly down. That is not a very good design. Also, not a very good design. If you can see here, there's no bathroom door, and you can see the door of whatever that is. That is not a great design. Also, the shower, the clear shower that you can see from a lot of different places, not great. Here, random pole. I don't know if the pole was there first or the house was there first, but now they are together. This is, you may not be able to see this, but outside the garage, there are steps. It's going to be very difficult to put a vehicle up into that garage. Okay, again, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but that's some sort of poster vent going into a door, and they just cut out the bottom of the door. Very difficult stairs to see down. This is just an accident waiting to happen. The smallest bathroom in the world. This looks, because of the shape of the toilet, this almost looks like might be not America, but still, it's small. Wherever it is, that's a super tiny bathroom. Here we go. Bad design. Look at those two. You're like, bad design of a toaster? No, bad design of the cabinet doors. I feel like every time you open them, if they open them together, it's going to be a problem. Yeah, that's just all kinds of difficulties with the cabinet doors. Hello. Okay, again, very bad. I don't know why the toilet's right in the middle of the bathroom there. That's very, very strange. This is all kinds of weird. There's just weird patterns. There are random things on the side of the house. The door looks weird. That is just very strange. Here's two rooms that kind of have stairs that go down. It's, again, very bad design. This, if you're having trouble seeing it, this is a clear piece of glass or plexiglass or something over a wooden structure with a drawer underneath that you can't really get to. So I don't know what usefulness this provides. We've seen this before. Tiny faucets that are very difficult to wash your hands underneath. And there you go. They do say the heat rises, but I don't think that putting your radiator on the ceiling is the most fantastic idea. All right. So Now, these were some listed, or those bad designs. These were some listed pet peeves that people have. This was not my list, although some of them I do agree with, but we'll see how we feel about them. Stopping suddenly in the middle of a busy sidewalk or walkway to read or send a text. There are a lot of distracted people out there. I can't say that I've never been one of those people who've done that, but as a rule, I try to walk with my head up. Any of you who've gone to a Red Sox game with me know that on Ipswich Street, which is right behind um, it's how you get to the stadium if you're walking from Boylston. There are a bunch of parking meters, and I learned not to walk looking down at my phone when I walk directly into one of the parking meters. Oh, speaking of Reverend Brian Spicer, hello. So anyway, maybe that bothers you. That's not a good practice. Accidentally holding up the line because you were indecisive or unaware of what you wanted to order when you reached the cashier of a fast food restaurant. A couple of issues with this. Um, Fast food is not great for you. I will just put that out there. Not healthy. But also not healthy is not knowing what you want when there's a group of people behind you and you get up to the counter. So kind of pet peevish there. FaceTiming someone without warning them that you're about to FaceTime them. My nieces FaceTime us all the time and they give us zero warning. So that's not a pet peeve because I get to see my nieces. There you go. Might be for you though. FaceTiming someone without headphones while out in public. Extremely annoying. There should very few reasons that I should have to listen to your phone call out in public. I'm just saying. Another one. This is so bad. Leaving shopping carts randomly in the parking lot instead of returning them. They have shopping cart spaces. Target, the grocery store, all of them. They have spaces for you to put the cart. Don't just leave it there. Very rude. Leaving a bunch of clothes you tried on in the fitting room and not buying anything because nothing looked like you wanted it to. I don't know if this is so much of a guy thing, but if this applies to you, this is a pet peeve of people, probably mostly to the workers that are there and have to clean up after you. Asking a friend to change the music in their car or in their home. I mean, does that still happen? I don't know. Asking questions during a TV show or movie instead of just watching. That could be a challenge for sure. All right, what else? Texting during a movie in a movie theater. Not great. I told you all before, Brian Spicer and I went to go see Blue Beetle, which is a DC comics movie. And there was only about 8 people in the theater, but 3 of them were some junior high boys in the back row that decided they were yelling, they were on their phones, they were making noise, and then they started throwing candy at us in the middle of the movie theater. It was difficult, very much pet peevish. Watching TikTok with the volume up in public. Again, this goes with if I don't want to hear you talking on the phone, I don't need to hear your videos while you're watching them. There is a pastor, a local pastor, might possibly be the pastor of Granite United Church that sends me TikToks all the time, very early in the morning, very late at night, and all the hours in between. But I do not watch them in public to bother other people. Using way too many hashtags on social media posts. There's really no reason for that. Oh, man. Oh, I'm sorry, Monica. Saying I'm 5 minutes away when you're still at home, otherwise known as lying. Not great. Standing in the middle of the escalator instead of keeping to the right. That is a problem. You know when it's worse? On the walking. What are they called? They're escalators, but they're walking ones. I don't know. In the airport, and people just will stand in the middle of there with all your luggage. And if you're walking quickly and trying to get through, very tough when people are just, maybe it's just like a moving sidewalk. I don't know, but don't stand in the middle of it with all your luggage. Filming an entire ride you're on at an amusement park. I think that's frowned upon anyway by the actual amusement park. Filming an entire concert you're at. Again, no, I don't know if they love you to do that. So not a pet peeve of mine. Holding up the checkout line while you grab an item that you forgot. That's rough. Let's be self-aware and not entitled. That's all I'm asking. Standing right next to you and blocking the baggage claim belt, like your suitcase will come out faster. Yes. I don't know when the last time anybody's been in an airport, but you know what happens. It when people get off the plane, they just all rush for the baggage claim and like bunch in as tight as they can. You're going to get your luggage, people, for the most part, unless it's lost. Then it's still not going to help that you're up right next to the thing. And then here we go. This is getting up and standing in the aisle of a plane as soon as it's parked, but before they open the doors. There is no reason for standing in the plane until they start letting people off. And I even get a shirt that said "Stop standing up when the plane lands." The flight attendants love it. Got some laughs from some people, but I feel like the people who the message was meant for either ignored it or didn't see it. So that's a tough one. If you're in row 26 of the plane, you don't have the right to jump up when the plane lands and then run past everybody. That is no good at all. I know it seems like I feel very strongly about that. Reason being, I do. Anyway. Oh, Claire is here. AJ is here. My mom is here. Nice. Got a nice crowd tonight. Oh, well, it makes this even better. All right, Monica, you need to go now. Oh boy. Come on. Yeah. Okay, Monica, everybody, the viral cat. All right. So we are in Romans 13. This one is awesome. This passage is about how followers of Jesus should think about unless your knees have been jammed into the seat in front of you the whole flight. Sure, standing up in your seat is fine. It's when you start crowding the aisles, it just makes it tough. Jonathan, you were one of the nicest people that I know, so I would imagine that you are not one that's charging in front of everybody when the plane lands. All right. All right, followers of Jesus thinking about government. Those of you who are on our email list, you would have seen last week I sent out a little thing about politics, not to incite riots, but just to see if people were reading. Gotten some nice responses back. The bottom line is we should be able to, somewhere along the line, it became culturally difficult, and we stopped learning how to discuss things in a rational way and in a way that retained respect and friendship. So along the way, it was like, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. And particularly, I mean, the Bible says we should be able to speak to our faith. Not talking about religion is a terrible idea. There are places like your workplace, if you're supposed to be working, that you don't want to sit down and have a conversation like that. But we should be able to have conversations about things. So my point of the email was that we should be able to discuss things that we disagree on and try to understand each other at the least. Anyway, and this segues into Romans 13. And here we are in Romans 13. So I'm going to read you the first 7 verses. Read you the first 4 verses. Here it is. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are instituted by God. So then the one who resists the authority is opposing what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have its approval. Kind of makes sense, right? Why do we panic when you pass a police officer parked on the side of the interstate? If you're going the speed limit, you don't have to worry about them. All right, verse 4. For he is God's servant for your good. And it says he, still talking about government and agents of the government. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because he does not carry the sword or bear the sword for no reason or in vain. For he is God's servant and avenger that carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, you must be in subjection or submit, not only because of wrath, but because of your conscience. So not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for for the sake of your conscience. So in other words, not just because of what they can do to you, because you recognize they are God's servants and submitting to them is an issue between you and God. By the way, this isn't the only authority that Paul ever talks about God this way. Paul tells children to obey their parents as unto the Lord in Ephesians. Submitting to their authority is a way of submitting to God, and disobeying that authority is disobedience to God, because for a while they stand in the place of God. Colossians 3 talks about supervisors. So this is not just Paul all of a sudden out of nowhere. And for this reason, or because of this, you pay taxes, since the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. We tend to focus on all the controversial stuff that government workers do, but the vast majority of government work, regardless of political party the leader belongs to, provide things that we can be grateful for, like the roads we drive on, services like 911, zoning ordinances, international trade agreements, national defense, all those things. These things take hard work, and for that reason, we pay taxes and should do this with a measure of gratefulness. Now, finally, verse 7, pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, respect or revenue or tolls to those you owe revenue, respect to those you owe respect, and honor to those you owe honor. So this is Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. So this is where we will be and what I will be referring to for this week and to next week. So we might ask, why is this section in here, in this whole book of Romans? In Romans 12, we were talking about how the gospel reshapes how we approach relationships. Specifically, it makes us love the church, love our friends, and love our enemies differently. But then we come to the seemingly random discussion about the government. Why is this here? A couple reasons. Number one, I think this is an application of Paul's instruction to leave vengeance to God. We discussed this in Romans chapter 12. Paul said that rather than taking vengeance into our own hands, we should leave it to God. One of the ways that God executes vengeance is through government authorities. It's not the ultimate way, and governments certainly get a lot wrong. But in one sense, governments stand in for God and execute justice on his behalf. That's what Paul says. Government is his servant. We just read that in verse 4. Second reason, this is here for the first century church. One of the primary places they would have had to overcome evil with good, remember that from chapter 12, would have been in their relationship with governing authorities. Remember, Paul said, overcome evil with good, bless those who curse you. Many of the people who were inflicting evil on the Christians and cursing them were government authorities. And the way they are to overcome them, Paul says, is by submitting, honoring, and obeying them, even when they don't always deserve it. In Romans 12:18, Paul had told them, as much as possible, live at peace with everyone. Again, this is the application. As much as you can, live at peace with the government by honoring and obeying them from your heart wherever you can. Third reason this section is in the letter, I think, many scholars believe that Paul expected Caesar or somebody on his behalf to read this letter. So Paul wants to make clear that his intentions are not to overthrow the government. Many of the religious philosophies of the world have as one of their primary goals the removal of the existing government and the replacing of it with a government led by leaders of the new religion. We've seen that over the years a ton of times. Many Jews in Paul's days were like that. They believed that God wanted them to overthrow Rome and establish his kingdom, and they were just biding their time until they could pull it off. They were called zealots. One of Jesus' original disciples had been in that group, Simon the Zealot. But Jesus had made abundantly clear that that was not his intention for his church. Remember, right before the crucifixion, Peter picks up a sword to fight, and Jesus told him to put it away because his kingdom wasn't of this world, and they shouldn't use physical force to bring it in. Jesus made it clear that his followers were to offer their lives for their enemies, not take the lives of their enemies like he did for us. So our role is not to overthrow human governments, to influence them. Yes. To be salt and light. Yes. To speak prophetically to rulers and those in authority, rebuke them for unrighteousness, warn them of judgment to come like John the Baptist did with Herod. Yes, but that is different than thinking that Christians are supposed to bring in God's rule with themselves as the rulers. If you can bear with me for just a minute, a writer named John Stott identifies 4 general ways the relationship between church and state has occurred. Number 1 is theocracy, where the church controls the state. Think the Vatican, or with Islam or places like Saudi Arabia. This is not good. Erastianism means the state controls the church. Certain parts of old Europe were like this. Think China and Russia, even worse than the first one. Then there was Constantinianism. It's a compromise where the state favors the church makes accommodations with the state in order to preserve favored status. Again, parts of old Europe were this way, not great. And then the fourth way, partnership, where church and state recognize that each have distinct God-given responsibilities, and they encourage and collaborate in fulfilling those roles. John Stott says the fourth seems to accord best with what Paul teaches in Romans 13. I would tend to agree with that. But at any rate, Paul wants to make clear to Caesar, or Caesar's people, when they read this, that when it comes to Rome, he's a missionary apostle, not a political agitator. And to the Roman Christians, he wants to make sure that their role is to influence, not overthrow. All right, so that's the reason I think this section is in here. Two primary things we're to glean from this passage. Number one is the responsibility of those who govern, and we'll cover that tonight. So Paul gives us this little job description for the government. It's not the main point of this section, but we could still learn from what he says. Paul's primary focus in this passage is not telling government leaders what God wants from them. His primary audience is the church, telling them how they should relate to rulers. That's not to say there's nothing government leaders cannot learn from this, which is why we'll talk about this for a few minutes. It's just that Paul's primary audience, if they had been government leaders, he probably would have emphasized different things. So I wouldn't look at this as an exhaustive philosophy of government. The second thing we're going to see are the responsibilities of the governed. That's most of us, specifically how God wants us to relate to our governments. So one important thing, when Paul wrote these things, none of the authorities were Christian. The authorities he's referring to were at best unfriendly and at worst actively hostile toward the church. This is a totally pagan and in many ways corrupt government he's talking about. A big question people have when we talk about this is, how can I honor a political leader when I don't approve of him or her or endorse a lot of what they stand for? Paul would not approve, he would not have approved of or endorsed a vast majority of what the governing leaders of his day did. And had there been a free election, he might not have voted for any of them. Can we just be real for a minute? You think many of our leaders are crazy? And for good cause at times. But think about this. Caligula was the Caesar around this time. He was unfit to keep a pet. Never mind run an empire. Let's think about the things that are considered his greatest accomplishments. He had his mom and brother killed to make sure they didn't ever challenge his right to the throne. He committed incest with 3 of his sisters. He would frequently cross-dress and go out in public. He installed his favorite horse as a senator and then promoted him later to consul. Like, what did the horse do as a senator to earn the promotion? Like, how does a horse even vote in the Senate? Caligula once got mad at the weather and declared war on Neptune, the Roman god of the sea. He ordered soldiers from the Roman army to whip the waves and bring home seashells like plunder from his domain. He had the heads of statues of deities removed and replaced with a bust of his own. Like, imagine if a president went through all the statues of Jesus in Washington and put their head on there. Craziness. Often during gladiatorial games, which were cruel enough, he would take random people from the crowds and throw them into the arena to be attacked by the wild animals, just to entertain himself. The point is, he was no Abe Lincoln. And after this, we had Claudius, who may have been a hair less crazy, but was every bit as cruel, who then hands over the throne to Nero. And when I say handed over, I mean Nero's mom killed Claudius in his sleep so that Nero could replace him. And Nero, of course, turned out to be one of the cruelest, most sadistic Christian killers of all time. He intentionally, or at least it is believed so, set fire to Rome. And then it's said that he stood on his balcony and played an instrument like he was some sort of tragic poet. We know that he blamed Christians for the fire and crucified hundreds of them. We know he had a party once where he lit up his courtyard with burning Christians as lanterns. Another time, he got mad at his pregnant wife and kicked her to death. He did worse stuff after that. It's into this context that Paul says, be subject to the governing authorities and honor them. So go easy saying I can't honor a political leader whom I don't respect as a person and whose policies I don't approve of. Tim Keller says the increasingly secular West is only just beginning to experience the level of hostility that first century believers faced. The 21st century persecuted church experiences it every day. It's this type of state which Paul tells the Christian to submit to. All right, so here we go. What are the responsibilities of those who govern? This is the state's job description. We read this in verse 4. For it is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because it doesn't carry the sword for no reason. For it is God's servant, an avenger that brings wrath on the one who does wrong. Here's a few things that we see. It brings wrath on the one who does wrong. So this is responsibilities of those who govern. Punish the bad. Paul said they don't carry the sword for no reason. The sword represents the power to punish, to make war. Some people see sword and wonder if Paul is endorsing capital punishment. While the sword was a symbol of violence, lethal violence, you're not getting spanked with it. If you're disobedient to the one who wields the sword, you get stabbed with it and you die. But this passage does not address all the complexities inherent in the capital punishment question, like for what crimes it should be administered, what's a reasonable burden of proof, is it administered fairly or equitably among social classes and ethnicities. These are major questions that need consideration in order to really discuss this. But you can see at least that Paul doesn't see the concept itself as evil. Paul says to Festus in Acts 25, if, however, I'm guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. This pretty strongly implies that Paul saw some things as worthy of death. But to reiterate, the point of this passage is not to discuss the ins and outs of lethal force or a war policy. It's just to say the government bears the responsibility of punishing the wrongdoer. When they do it in his name, whether they're Christians or not, and they'll be accountable to God. It's his sword that they bear. They say they're God's servants in doing so. And so they should do it with diligence and justice. When governments allow injustice to thrive or the strong to trample the weak, whether that's a criminal with ordinary citizens, the cause of the immigrant in the courts, foster child in the home, unborn in the womb, predatory lender with the elderly, private individual having their religious freedoms crushed by a powerful organization. When governments allow these things to happen, they're failing at their God-given jobs. The government bears a responsibility to protect its citizens from enemies at home and abroad. And they're given the sword in this passage for that reason. And when they use it in his name, whether they're Christians or not. If you're in government, you must pursue these purposes with humility, justice, and diligence, because you'll give an account for God. So the second thing, he says in verse 4, he says, for your good. So responsibilities of government, punish the bad, promote the good. I want to be careful not to read too much into Paul's words, because Paul's not intending to lay out this political philosophy. But one of the government's jobs is to promote the good, the general welfare of their citizens. That's certainly how healthy governments have seen themselves throughout history. It's in our own Constitution, right? The founders wrote, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. This is not the place to go into what all goes into each category, but Tim Keller points out that Paul's words here avoid both extreme libertarianism or extreme liberalism. Christians need to be wary, he said, of extreme ideological views on the role of government. On the one hand, it's hard to find biblical support for the very conservative view that government should do nothing but basic law enforcement. On the other hand, the Bible cannot support the very liberal socialist view as the government as savior. That's what Tim Keller says. So I know that's a lot. What I love is I'm dumping this all in the small group. You guys are going to have a very great discussion about this. But the idea is, and we'll talk about next week, what our responsibility, the responsibility of the governed, right? When Paul speaks about organizations, submit is one of them, just so you know. But how do we live? How can we be good citizens, right? We believe as followers of Jesus, we're citizens of heaven, but we also live here on earth, and we do have responsibilities to live rightly and to be good examples as followers of Jesus. So first, Paul said, government to punish the bad, promote the good. There's a lot that goes into that. I know we've said a lot, but this is Romans 13 so far, and we'll hit the other half of it next week. Small group, hope you have a great rest of your time tonight. I appreciate y'all, the rest of you. Hope you have a great rest of your week. We look forward to those of you who are following us on Sunday. We're in Philippians still. Brian Spicer and I are tag teaming the book of Philippians, so I'm excited about that. We're still in Philippians 1 on Sunday, so it's going to be great. And yeah, like I said, next week we'll be back with more of Romans 13. Appreciate the chance to be able to do this. Appreciate your time, and I am praying for you, and hope you have a great rest of your week. Hey, Claire, thank you so much. We will talk to y'all soon.